Welcome to Big 20, where we go behind the GM screen. My name is Eric.
This is Dan. You're muted, Mike.
And I'm Mike.
Well done. So, Eric, I heard there was a little bit of news this week.
Yeah, there was. For those who don't know, Pathfinder 2.0 was announced. So we're going to talk about what exactly that means to the tabletop gaming community, the hobby as a whole, and just kind of what we remember going through the last time a major game went through, and games do that. They go through edition changes and updates and things like that. So, and there's probably some of you who've been through it all with us too, and we're just probably going to talk about some things that perspectives from our perspective, and then some details that we do know, and what what else our thoughts are on something as big as this, because Pathfinder is one of the big games out there. I mean, for a while it was the biggest game. When D&D kind of did a little bit of a tailspin.
I have a confession. This will technically, if this spirals into another edition war, this will technically be my first.
Really?
So I actually have some questions, because the timeline that went from D&D 3rd edition, 3.5, Pathfinder 4th edition, 5th edition happens. I was in college, and then I transitioned to my job. So this really occurred whenever I was away from the hobby. I played original 3rd edition maybe twice right after it came out, because I distinctly remember getting my player's handbook, because remember it came with the disc with the character generator. We did that for a little bit, go off to college, come back, don't get to play. And then you guys were in the middle of 3.5, and then things start to shake up, and then I come back to the hobby right about at 5th edition time. So how did that shake out? How did that, what was the timeline? How did that occur?
You want to know the sequence of events?
Sure.
Where Pathfinder came to where they're at?
Now, correct me if I'm wrong.
Or what?
Pathfinder started out they worked with D&D, they created D&D content. Right?
Oh, you're talking about Paizo.
Paizo, right?
Right.
And at some point, that ceased to be. So how did that all work out?
Let's see, about 10 years ago, Paizo was putting out a lot of good stuff for D&D through the magazines, and when they got the license pulled from them, they still had a large fan base, and they decided to create their own game world called Galarian, and this whole Pathfinder deal. Within a year, D&D had started 4th edition, and right around the same time then, Pathfinder had a head start on it. See, they were
so Pathfinder,
they were growing.
So Pathfinder as a game came out before 4th edition.
I don't know which technically dropped first, but
okay.
I was just going to say that the fan base for what became Pathfinder was already in place through the conventions and everything. It was heavily play tested, loyal fan base. They took all the input from fans. Whereas 4th edition, could be wrong, was very in-house. And I think one of the criticisms was it wasn't fan-friendly.
Is that because the OGL licensing as Gaming Gauge points out in the chat, there was some discrepancy. OGL changed a bit. Like, was fourth edition?
Oh, yeah.
licensed under OGL?
Well, see, that's
There was no content, like, really, from third parties.
Oh, Paizo definitely took advantage of the OGL and were very successful because of it. And because of that success is why fourth edition did not have an OGL.
Well,
it was something else.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was called.
It was the GSL.
GSL.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's just like if look at it as like a political party, right? If you have a third party running, it takes away from both the major parties, and I think that's kind of what happened when fourth edition. I guess the assumption was that D&D was always going to be D&D, and the fan base was going to stay loyal to the brand, and Pathfinder basically showed them that's not true. It wasn't the brand that they were loyal to. It was the game itself, and
it was the rules system, because Pathfinder was very similar to 3.5, right? It was kind of an extension.
It is. Okay. At first it was 3.5, and they had to create Pathfinder to just tweak it a little to make it their own game.
Okay.
And I also want to take it another step further, guys. The convention play that they were doing when Paizo got dropped and they created their own game world, all those loyal fans that came over who were convention fans were former Living Greyhawk fans.
Okay.
Living Greyhawk had ran. Oh, yeah. Living Greyhawk had been running for 6 or 7 years itself. And when that burnt out, then they all jumped over to Pathfinder.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
So we go third edition D&D briefly. 3.5 happens sometime toward the end of 3.5.
Yeah.
Paizo creates Pathfinder. Fourth edition drops. We get fourth edition for a handful of years. Pathfinder doesn't really iterate or change a whole lot. The rule structure is about the same. Ton of splat books, and toward the end of that, fifth edition D&D happens, which by this time fifth edition D&D has been out for about 3 years now.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, 3.
So now Paizo announces Pathfinder 2.0. So that's pretty huge, right? Because Pathfinder as a game world has been going on for over 10 at this point, right? If you count
roughly
all the content they created for 3.5 under the guise of 3.5 D&D and the stuff they've done, that's longer than any run of D&D, any one edition of D&D, isn't it?
I can't say for certain, but it's pretty damn good.
Yeah, that's a long run. That's a lot of time for people to build collections.
Oh yeah.
Right. Which when this came up, the first thing I thought of, we're trying to spin this as to how this relates to GMs and game groups. This is very similar to comic books to me. A new player has no jumping on point for Pathfinder, right? Our friend Brandy, she was introduced to the game through the card game, but that was the first time I'd heard of new players picking up Pathfinder as a game, because it's so massive, right? You really can't start reading Spider-Man right now because you're completely lost. There's just so much to know. And I kind of felt like that's why I never was particularly interested in Pathfinder 3.5, is because there was just too much.
Yeah, I think
so. That's a plus, I guess, in the side of versioning.
Yeah, there is that. A lot of gamers are also game collectors, or they are completionists, and so whenever you
loved those people.
Well, yeah, and you have a game, and how do you feed the beast? You keep churning out stuff. That was one of the big knocks on 3.5 was that you had this gigantic system bloat, and it felt like you had to keep up with the Joneses. Otherwise, you were going to fall behind on rules and things like that, especially if you're going to do something like a living campaign, or you're going to do the convention scene or something like that, because the expectation is that you will have, a working knowledge, or at least a passing knowledge of most of the up-to-date material, especially if you go to a con and something's been out for a year and you're handed a character and you're playing a game, or God forbid you want to run a game, and not want to include some of these things. It's almost sacrilegious. Some people will really, try and, I wouldn't say necessarily pressure you to do it, but it's the expectation is there that you're supposed to be on top of all of these things. So I understand what you're saying, where you're coming into a hobby and you're like, well, I could get into this game, which has maybe 2-3 books or whatever, or I could get into this game, but the completionist in me would be like, 10 years worth of books, and you can stack it as high as, two toddlers standing on top of each other. And, that's very daunting, and you feel compelled to do that, especially if let's say you're a new, I couldn't imagine this, but could you imagine being a new game master sitting down to a group of Pathfinder 1 and and they've been playing for a while and they just need somebody to run a game for them, and them going, here's all the books you need to know. I couldn't fathom even trying to do something.
Study
like
up. Study up.
Well, yeah, it's almost like, you got to take a speed reading course just to figure, to with that. I mean, that was the big knock on 3.5. Now people are starting to say the same thing about Pathfinder, and you've got people who we know who's bought every book that Pathfinder.
I was going to say, I was going to ask a friend of the show, Greg, who's been on another project of ours. Does he in fact own every Pathfinder? There was a time when he could say he owned everything Pathfinder.
As far as I know, he does.
Every splat book and
yeah, because I think that's one of his things was every year at Gen Con, he would go to Gen Con and get that year's books.
Right.
Whatever came out since the previous Gen Con, and then whatever they were releasing at that Gen Con. So he would get, $200 worth of books easy. That's not including like adventure paths and stuff like that. So
I have a question. Again, because I was gone for most of this, but I'm aware that the edition wars were a thing, and people picked and choose the games that they decided to play. Some people stuck with 3.5 D&D.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what they did. They never moved on to 4th. I think a lot of those people probably adopted 5th at this point. Some people were loyal with the rules of 3.5 and went on to Pathfinder because they didn't jump on 4th edition D&D. How did that shake out for you guys at home in our regular games? How did that work out for you? Because I know you guys didn't play a whole lot of 4th edition D&D.
Well, I ran it for several months. And I had the core 3 books and then a few other books. And so I've always been the kind of person that, you're like me, you like the new and shiny. Well, yeah, it's the new stuff, right? It's like, oh, this is the new stuff. And in my thinking, it's, when something new has come out, they're not going to support the old stuff. And, that's always a fear. And then, you get FOMO and things like that, but you also have this, you don't want to be left in the dust. And there's people who don't feel that way, and they think, you're nuts. My wife is exactly the same way. I tried to explain this to her. My wife is not a gamer. I tried to explain this to her, that this is what's going on. This is what this, announcement means, for all these people that bought all these books and stuff. And she was like, that's fucking stupid. Why does this invalidate every book that you have? And, to somebody who's not a gamer, they don't understand. No, not all of them understand. It's like, those books still have information in them. What's the problem? And I think that's a much more healthy mentality than to get all bent out of shape that something's changing editions.
Yeah, like it's a little bit different when we do like galactic reboots of things. This have like what happens in comics, and D&D kind of tried to do a little bit in Forgotten Realms occasionally. But my point to that is it's not that it's invalidating stuff. There's still good fluff in those books, but begins to create the burden of conversion. No matter how easy it is, there's still extra work to be done, and running a game is already, I think, enough work. So if your group wants to do the new thing, you get on board. You seldom are you going to go back unless it's really really good stuff, or you're using it for specific pieces. You're less inclined to do the extra work for the conversion. And I think, and they know that, right? So that's why we get rehashes of the same stuff. So there's a point of, so you guys didn't do a ton of 4th edition D&D or necessarily transition to Pathfinder. So I guess my question is, was it a problem with selling a new game because of people's investment, or is it the stress of learning a new system?
Well, I didn't. I did play a lot of Pathfinder. Don't get me wrong, because of the game group with a friend Greg. For me, it was a conscious decision not to go wholeheartedly into it. I mean, I have the core book, but it was a financial decision not to get in it, and also a time decision, because I'm a very Greyhawk community oriented person, and the Pathfinder community is just as rabid and enormous as Greyhawk has ever been.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but if in fact you, as a Greyhawk grognard, were to play Pathfinder, your card would be revoked, right? You'd be kicked out of the society of the Greyhawk people.
No, early on there was a lot of crossover. No, I did hang out in Pathfinder chat rooms and whatnot. I don't even know if those are still around.
Oh my God, you're old. So
Chat
old,
room, what?
Mike.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Don't betray yourself like that.
A lot of the people who work on Pathfinder currently, at the beginning and currently, are old Greyhawk people. So I knew all those people, and we saw them at Gen Con. So yeah, no, and there was a lot of crossover there for a while, but they left me in the dust after a while, and I just can't keep up with their fluff anymore.
Well, it's hard to do. I mean, if you don't have an investment in it, personally, like you're not running a game that's that's Pathfinder, then the burden isn't yours to keep. So and with the amount of stuff that came out, just one right after the other, it's hard to do that. My brother-in-law, he had a long-term Pathfinder game, and was just it got to the point where the rules bloat had gotten so bad that he was so burnt out from just trying to keep up with all that crap, and I think
this is not the first time we've heard this. Specifically, Deuce, friend of ours, had a very long running Pathfinder game. They were staunch Pathfinder people, and then don't see them for a while. And what have they done? They've gone backwards to Core 3 D&D 3.5 because it's where Pathfinder was born without everything else that came along the way.
I tried to mix the two there for a while. I was still running 3.5 games, and I would inject Pathfinder stuff into it once in a while. Thank God 5th edition come along. Give me a new jumping point.
Right. Well, okay. So the winds of change, they were blowing in what we would call "quote unquote" modern RPGs, and then 5th edition D&D comes back around, and it's dipping its toe in OSR territory, like trying to go backwards a little bit, maintain some new concepts that we have, streamline it down, but try to bring it back because part of the backlash of 4th edition was it was very unpopular with older gamers, with established game groups. Young groups didn't have a problem with 4th edition. It felt very natural to them because it was very heavily inspired by the things that they were already doing, like MMOs, like WoW. It's a very WoW oriented game. Most people would agree. Learning from the mistakes of the past, and the cynical person would want to say that this is a cash grab, right? So for the sake of argument, let's assume that it's not, right? Let's assume that it's not an opportunity to redo everything that they have done and get your money again. Let's look at it as an opportunity that they, in fact, maybe feel the same way, that that their child has grown up and gotten away from them, right? So we're gonna learn from our first kid. Second kid's always better than the first kid, right? Because you know what you're doing. First kid's always a bad seed. So you know what you're doing a little bit more. We don't, at this point, we don't have a whole lot to go on, but it seems like they are going in a 5th edition style direction. They're paring things down, picking and choosing the things that work, and more importantly, and this is one thing I definitely give D&D credit for, is listening to their community and doing lots of play testing. Now I realize now Mike led off with the fact that Pathfinder was bred of public play testing, right? And
D&D learned from that.
Yeah, and they're doing that again. That was one of the main things they put in their press release, is that it is going to go through a major public play test.
Right. Yeah, and
just so happens to coordinate with Gen Con.
Of course it does.
Where they will sell the limited edition, only one print run books.
Right.
But this is not a cash grab.
I think that yes, you're right. It is from the things that I've read, and I think somebody, I can't remember who it was, somebody online I think put it the best. Think of it as a house plant, right? And when your house plant gets too big for the pot that it's in, you have to put it into a bigger pot. You have to prune it. You have to do something to it. If you just leave it in that same pot, it will die. And I think that's a good analogy, because if you get Pathfinder got so big, Pathfinder 1 got so big and so complicated, and like you said, the winds of change are upon us, and we're looking around and we're seeing things like more and more people playing D&D, people playing D&D for other people to watch. And Pathfinder's got to be seeing that and going, is our game too big? Is it too bloated? Is it too crunchy, to use a game parlance? And yes, I think absolutely it is. It's too crunchy for the masses. The masses want streamlined. They want something that it doesn't require hours upon hours upon hours of pre-stuff just to get up to par.
Right. And I think even creatively, at some point you have to ask yourself, is the thing you are doing what you want to be doing?
Right.
Right. So it's their product. They can do whatever they want with it. I personally believe that the Pathfinder Paizo event and the subsequent not so awesome 4th edition reception by the community created 5th edition D&D, which I love. I think is great. So that was competition at its best. Pathfinder, to me, created 5th edition D&D.
Oh, without a doubt.
As much or more than Wizards did.
And without a doubt.
They learned from Paizo. They took community involvement and they took feedback at the very beginning of 5th edition D&D. And that continues to go through, what is it called? The Unearthed Arcana stuff. Mm-hmm. So the game continues to grow with player feedback. And these are the same things that Paizo are doing. They kind of started it, they honed it, and hopefully we're going to run with that and make a new game. But it doesn't invalidate anything before it. So that's the hope anyway, that what we get will still be usable in a way that I can use it. I don't have to convert so much.
Right. That's always the dream. That is very rarely the reality. Unfortunately.
The press release from Paizo is a symphony of saying absolutely nothing, right? It's so totally gray, but hits all the buzzwords and high points that you want it to, but it doesn't actually tell you anything. Right? So kudos to them. I mean, Now, okay, so this is sort of
So what you're saying, it's like being, a stealth stroke off is what it was.
right. Well, it's like they put it through a corporate doublespeak generator, which I have done before for things at my work. One thing I thought was kind of strange about this whole thing is we have Starfinder, and then I thought about, remember Saga Edition Star Wars was sort of the playing ground for the new rule set. I'm really surprised that Starfinder isn't whatever this rule set is, and that was
Right.
like their test bed, their plaything,
Right.
because it's new. It can be whatever it wants to be. So I wonder, like, where in that timeline does the decision to do Pathfinder 2.0 occur, right? So I can only guess. I mean, because the development cycle of these things is pretty long.
Yeah.
So we know that Starfinder had to have been in development for some time. So I guess at some point that's where they decided, oh, wait a minute, maybe we're going to do this new thing. So to me, that seems like a strange missed opportunity. Or then they can just do Starfinder 2.0.
Well, that's true
There's
too. Talking about the the release of the playtest materials at Gen Con, I read a thing where people were criticizing and saying, how are you going to release playtest materials that I have to buy when before I was asked to playtest stuff, and hell, I was even given swag for playtest. Those days are over.
You know who we have to blame for this? Fantasy Flight Games.
Fantasy Flight Games.
Every
Exactly
edition
right.
of the Star Wars role-playing game
Right.
has gone through a beta edition that you buy at
Right.
Gen Con.
Yep.
Every time. Right?
And
So and people line up for this. I can't even fathom. The Paizo lines are bad enough as it is at Gen Con. To have this,
yeah,
forget about it.
it's
Forget
going to be
about it.
crazy.
You're going to have to pay people to stand in line for you, right? Like ticket placeholders.
Right.
So you can pre-order. It's in the press release. One of the things they did say definitively is that you would be able to pre-order it through your friendly local game store, so you don't have to stand in that massive line. But again, it's a single print run, so quantities will be X, and when X is gone, it's gone. And you can get the PDF also. All of these are the lessons that we've learned from everything else that comes before it. To me, that's the whole point of versioning, right? That's why we iterate. The hope is that it's not just about creating something different. It's the hope that you're creating something better. Or maybe you made a mistake in the past and you want to remedy it. It's like running the same module over again for a new party, right? You can fix all the things you fucked up in the first place. So the hope, the kid in me wants that to be the case, right? That it's not this cash grab, and that is going to create a better game, because a better Pathfinder creates a better D&D.
Sure.
Creates a better OSR community, right? All of these things, as different as these games are, the stronger the hobby is, the more we get, and the more we get, the better it gets. I think nobody's going to debate the fact that over the last 5 years, gaming, we have got the best stuff in the last 5 years. The content that's been put out in the last 5 years has been absolutely amazing across all different genres, across tons of different companies. Partially Kickstarter, partially Drive-Thru RPG, and partially the fact that this is just the nature of games, and everybody's borrowing from everybody else,
Right.
and making good stuff.
Right. And if they can bring in, let's say they bring in some people who maybe weren't involved the first time, and, get some fresh ideas, and, do some innovative stuff. I mean, how innovative and elegant is in 5th edition is the advantage disadvantage system.
It's my
right?
favorite thing in the world.
Right.
It's my absolute favorite.
It's one of those things where you're just like, why didn't I friggin' think of that? Right.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, advantage disadvantage is just a front-loaded reroll, right? But it's so much better in the using than just saying a front-loaded reroll.
Well, yeah, because a back-ended reroll, you're reactive, whereas it feels like you're being proactive.
Right.
Putting it.
Do I want to waste it? I mean, I might succeed anyway. And truthfully, more to me, what is better than advantage is disadvantage. Disadvantage is so good, right? There's the impending dread whenever you throw out disadvantage.
Sure.
I think and it's such a simple mechanic that you can throw it in any game. I think. I think it's perfect for Mutants and Masterminds. Mike debates me on this one, but I think it's perfect.
Is 2D20 becoming the rage? I see now that this Conan game we've started has it.
Modiphius's kind of bread and butter right now is the 2D20 system, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's what they're hanging their hat on. But
if I throw advantage disadvantage in that, so we're throwing 4D20s.
40-20, take the disadvantage.
That's
take the two worst.
Yes, that's power creep.
That would
right
suck. There. But talking about edition wars, that's a good one to talk about. I mean, with Pathfinder, at least, you're talking about the same, the same game world, right? And it's kind of what happened with the Conan game. You had the old D20, the Mongoose D20 Conan game, and then you now have Modiphius's 2D20 game, and you're compelled to maybe do some conversions because like I've got a shelf right over here, has all that stuff on it, all that old Mongoose D20 stuff, and if conversion is pretty seamless, I think that would be in the best interest of Pathfinder and Paizo, is to make it so that way, take out some of the things that maybe slowed the game down or caused you to have to reach into your bag of death to pull out 4 source books to figure out what the hell you're trying to do. Take out some of that stuff, but then make the core mechanic simple enough or similar enough that all that stuff isn't invalidated and you're just not throwing it in the wood chipper, right?
Right. Well, like one-sided die in the chat is talking about is how much is this game going to look like 3.5, the existing thing, which is familiar and safe, right?
Right.
Paizo saw what happened with 4th edition D&D, and that if you stray too much from the original, you stand to alienate people, and that's bad.
Right.
For money. Or do you run the risk of the thing you produce becoming just too much like 5th edition D&D? The press release is quick to point out that it is less like D&D 5th edition than people are assuming it's going to.
Right.
And I think that is the right play. Because if it's just like it, why would I just continue to play D&D unless I just love the world of Paizo?
Right.
So I think there's room for all of these things.
Right.
In the press release, they were talking about character creation. It's like a 3-step process: race,
sounded a lot like D&D
background,
yeah,
class. It's like that's the same 3 things.
Again, there's only so much wheel here, right?
Right.
There's only so much to reinvent. There's only so much to reskin. And this is one of the interesting things about games is, as far as I understand, rules are not really patentable, right? So we can pick and choose and we can borrow. Like the concept of rules. This came out of everybody's favorite litigator games workshop.
Sure.
There comes a point where the rules you can just take them and use them, and there's not really much you can do about it, I think. The good faith of the OGL is that you contribute and you credit back to the original creators. That's the whole idea of open source, right? Like in the software world. So would anybody care if Pathfinder was just 5th edition Pathfinder?
Reskin.
Right? Reskin. Does anybody care about that?
Well,
Wizards of the Coast would care.
Wizards of the Coast would care, but
because they'd lose their audience.
Potentially. We see I don't know that the people playing 5th edition would go to Pathfinder if Pathfinder 5th edition came around, right? Because Pathfinder people are doing Pathfinder things. It's like a secular society, right? And that's fine. People do whatever people want to play the game they want to play.
No.
And you're invested in worlds. Like Mike continues, you play Greyhawk, whereas many other people went to Forgotten Realms. So we have our investments, and we kind of stay in those little pools.
Yeah, you're right. They won't jump ship. What Pathfinder's lacking right now is the critical roles and the online shows and all that.
Yeah. I mean,
the mass media stuff.
I hope that it's better than 5th edition D&D. I hope it's way better than 5th edition D&D, because then the next D&D is better than that. I want the power creep to be good, right?
Well, yeah,
I don't want the power creep to be splat books and and I wanted to move the hobby forward, right? That's my only hope for this.
Right. Well, I mean, think about it. You had when 5th edition was being developed, and they were playtesting, they were calling it D&D Next and whatnot. They were looking at all kinds of different sources of, where can we find the next D&D? Where can we need to start looking at all these different sources and all these different play styles and all this other stuff. And they started looking at other games and, other games like Savage Worlds. If there was, there's always been other games to play. But like you said, we're living right now in probably the best time to be a tabletop gamer, because there's so much good material out there that, hey, if you're not a D&D person, you're not a D&D person. No big deal. You just, you play Savage Worlds, or you play, you play Fate, or you play one of these other great games that's out there, if that's the style that you want to play. D&D did it right by looking at these sources rather than being, letting hubris take over and go, we're D&D.
We're D&D. We do whatever we want.
Right. We're going back to THACO.
They got knocked down a notch. See, maybe that was good, right? Maybe the 4th edition lesson was good. Get a little humility.
Right.
Yeah.
You never know how good you are in a fight until you get punched in the nose. Right? So that's what happened. D&D got punched in the nose. And
Eric, how much can you really know about yourself if you've never been in a fight?
Right. I don't want to die without any scars.
I don't want to die. The great prophet Tyler Durden said that.
That's right. Yeah. So, we're speculating a lot of the things, because obviously the things, it's not out yet, and all we have really is a press release and then reaction. And that's something else that I wanted to talk about is the reaction to this. And, yes, this episode itself is a reaction to the announcement. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And you had a lot of people who've been through the edition wars, right? They're just like, oh my God, here we go again. But I don't know, man. I think that as gamers have moved on and moved up and done things, they don't want that old, bitterness anymore. I think that it's the internet. You're going to get bitterness, and you're going to get horrible people. And,
no, whoa,
right.
Now.
I know it's hard to believe, but you do.
I don't believe it.
And then of course you're going to get snide comments, because that's the internet too.
I think the younger people, the younger me, would have probably been a lot more passionate about the idea of this thing changing. Old me, not so much. I don't know how much D&D 5th has done well. I think most people would agree 5th edition D&D has done well bringing new people into the fold. But I don't know that they have been into it long enough to get attached to the thing, right? I think a lot of gamers, and this is really good branding and marketing on the D&D side, is everything is D&D. Right, D&D has become synonymous with the term role-playing game. So we have the Pathfinder D&D game, right? This is a thing that people believe, right? This is just the nature of things. You look at Twitch. We are in the D&D Twitch channel. It's not the tabletop RPG channel. It's the D&D channel, right? So there's a degree of like how do you get new people into the game, and you do that with a jumping on point like a 2.0. I think it's good, right? Especially if the game itself is good and is accessible and easy to run. We started out this, if you think back to white box, old school stuff, rules were really like we're learning these things as we go along. And that's why every edition gets a little bit different. And some people would say better or maybe worse, depending on how flexible you are to change. So you're a new player, you go to your shop, or at this point you go to Amazon, and what game are you going to get? And to me, this is kind of what Pathfinder is up against, is what do I go, and when I Google Dungeons and Dragons or D&D, I'm going to get D&D.
Right.
I'm not going to get Pathfinder.
Nope.
Right.
Well, hell, man. What was it? Just recently, there. What was it? Old Spice did a mock-up of a character class, and it was for Pathfinder, and D&D got all the buzz.
Yeah.
Because it was like, oh well, how funny! Old Spice makes a D&D class that you can play. I mean, that had to have been a major kick in the nuts. It's like, that's like saying, hey, pointing at your friend and saying to your girlfriend, yeah, you got a really cute boyfriend there. Well, wait a minute, no, motherfucker, she's with me. She's with me.
Well, what this reminds me of, and again, it's interesting marketing, and maybe it's not even so much always marketing, it's cultural. If you go to the South, you don't order a Pepsi, you order a Coke, regardless of what drink you are buying.
Right.
It's all a Coke.
Right. Yeah.
That was really strange to me the first time that I saw it. And I said, "What kind of Coke do you want?"
Well, I don't like diet.
I would like a Pepsi, actually, or maybe do you have a Mountain Dew? Yeah. Then why the hell did you just call it Coke? I don't understand this. So that's the hard sell for Pathfinder 2.0 is this, and it's, you want to be an entry point for new people, but new people think D&D is D&D. Yep. So this is a difficult area.
Yep. And
if all you're doing is appealing to your core base, there's less incentive to iterate, right? So it's a really interesting, it's going to be an interesting year, I think, for D&D or D&D for Pathfinder, the Pathfinder brand of D&D.
What kind of D&D do you play?
What kind Pathfinder? Of D&D do you play? I play Hubris. I play the Hubris brand of D&D. I like the Warhammer D&D myself. That's my personal favorite.
Fedmerk has a good point on the chat that if you want to explain to someone what con you're going to or whatever, you just say D&D. I just had that same thing come up like the other day. It's like you tell someone D&D, that's what I'm doing. I might not be playing D&D, but they get D&D.
Well, yeah, this comes up like Brandy says in the chat. Boshi in the chat says she is tired of explaining mutants and masterminds to people, right? So you have to use that entry point. Or if I say I'm playing a role-playing game and people say you're playing D&D, I'm like, it's like D&D, right? I mean, we may in fact be playing D&D, but we're not always. So that's the interesting sell, is like people don't get that, like squares, lame people who don't get this game, right? They don't understand that D&D is like this tiny little fraction, regardless of the fact they say the world's greatest role-playing game, right? It's just one small piece to this gigantic puzzle and this huge hobby that keeps getting better. That's my contention.
Yeah. With something Mike was talking about, having the mass marketing appeal, I think until Pathfinder does do something like that, where they have a critical role, and I have no doubt they probably don't have the backing and the funding to do that. I mean, they're an independent producer, right? They're not
D&D's about to have a movie.
Yeah, I mean,
how could that possibly fail, Mike?
No, I mean, that's never
couldn't possibly
a bad
fail.
idea.
Right.
So until they have something like that, they're going to be kind of in the weeds. I mean, I was looking at the on Reddit. I was looking at just some of the reaction of people, and I would say most of the reaction, especially there, was relatively positive. Even one of
I was pleasantly surprised. This story, I don't know if it was broke, but where I saw it was on Ian World.
Yeah.
And there was initially there was a poll. Morris is really good about those link bait titles and such, and snapping into a poll, like snatching that up really quick. And the results of the poll, I think, were really positive. Is the average person was, I'm kind of interested in this, like not the I hate this. This is a money grab. These people are assholes, and I've wasted all this money kind of a response. Right. I was really happy with that, and I think that also again, it kind of shows the maturity of the community at this point. Well, I don't think that poll would have looked the same for D&D 7 years ago.
Absolutely,
that would have looked a lot different.
Well, yeah, and it also shows the maturity and just the connectedness that these companies have with their fan base too. It's
instantly accessible.
Yeah, yes. and if fourth edition was there are hardcore fourth edition players, and God love them, but it alienated a lot of people.
I want to meet these people in the wild.
Yeah, no kidding. We should have like a retreat, fourth edition retreat.
Can I, man, how interesting would it be? I'm gonna like fourth edition people. Like there are fourth edition deniers. There may in fact be one in this chat right now, on this call.
What, that it never even existed?
Right.
It's like a flat earther. What are we talking about here?
Exactly. Like, this is what I want. I want that fourth edition group that says, the hell with fifth edition. Fourth is as good as it gets, and this is all that I need.
That's right. Let's find those
people.
So we need to find and we need to like elevate these people, because
and I want to cultivate
the limelight. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I want to cultivate them. I want to boost them up.
That's right.
So another positive, I think, to this is for the people who are tired of buying things, you don't have to do anything anymore. Your game is now Pathfinder, as it is now, is Greyhawk. It's like on pause. It's setting, it's done. It is what it is, and you can do whatever you want with it, but you don't have to worry about somebody else coming in and fucking it up.
Let's put it in. Let's put it in World of Warcraft terminology, right? You've just hit max level. Now the real game starts, right?
Now we hack the crap out of it and we do whatever we want,
right?
Because you don't care.
I mean, now that everything's out, now you don't have to. You are no longer under any pressure to buy the next book. You've got it, baby. You've hit the pinnacle.
And I mean, after buying $3,000 worth of books, I mean, that's got to be kind of a nice feeling, I would think. Oh God, because there comes a point, and I heard this in the shop pretty often, like with comic runs. Like, people were happy when comic runs ended because they felt like they had to keep up, right? This is like the precursor to people having a news feed in Facebook, right? You feel like you have to get to the end of it,
right?
Because there's a finality to it, and there's something nice about the finality of an edition, I think.
I wish more people thought that way, because then it's a triumph, right? It's hey, I did it. I've got the entire collection. I mean, you're right. People who collect comic books, especially comic books like, for instance, I collect Master of Kung Fu, right? And there's runs in there that I don't have, and I'm always on the lookout for them.
And you're incomplete as a person because you do not have these things.
Right. There's pieces of me missing because I don't have
pieces
those.
of you missing. Yes.
Right. Unfortunately, it's not the right pieces. But more people don't think that way. The initial knee-jerk reaction is, well, fuck, here we go again. Now all my shit is invalidated. No, it's not.
Let's assume for a second, because it's an interesting thought I just had. Well, it's interesting to me. What if Pathfinder is the X-Files, right? And at some point, like 2 years ago, Pathfinder stopped being awesome to you, but you still kept up with it because you're invested in this thing, right?
Right.
And you're buying books whether you want them or they're even good,
Right.
or they suit your campaign or your party's play style or all of this. Yet you continue on.
Right. How many years did our friend Jason watch Smallville? You know,
And he hated it. He would tell
after
you he
fifth
hated
season, he was like, "Oh my God, why do I keep
this
watching
show
this crap?"
sucks.
Right.
I'm DVRing it right now.
Right. It's like, yeah. I mean,
people
same
people
goes
are
with
so
a lot
funny.
of shows and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
people are so funny in this.
Yeah.
So we get the reset button. We get to start over.
Yep.
I'm really big on starting over. I love new shiny things. I'm bad. This Pathfinder 2.0 is like right in my wheelhouse. Right?
Oh yeah.
Because not only do I get something new and shiny, it's hopefully new rules, which I love.
Yep.
As strange as that may be. And it's a chance to start over.
Right. And and if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm fairly certain Reynolds is going to be doing the art again.
Which I contend, this is an inflammatory statement. I contend that Pathfinder is the house that Wayne Reynolds built.
Oh, I don't doubt that at all. I mean,
the
sure,
art
the
of
rules
Wayne
are the
Reynolds.
rules, but yeah, if it's not for the iconic artwork of his,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, no way. No way. And to even think about it without his artwork is almost sacrilegious. It's almost like, how can you even do that?
To me at this point, Wayne Reynolds and Pathfinder is like Vallejo and Conan, original Conan art. They're like, those artists to me are Conan, and it's not anybody else who does Conan is not Conan to me.
Right. Vallejo,
somebody else
Frazetta,
did-
all those guys. Yeah.
Yeah, Vallejo, Frazetta,
All the
those
60s,
guys. Frazetta,
60s
I'm
artists,
sorry.
right? All the
Frazetta,
all
that was the
all the
one I was
bubbly
thinking
butt
of.
girls. That's what
Yeah. Well, that in the men, I mean, because both of them are very extreme but beautifully done. And I was trying to think of Frazetta. That's how Wayne Reynolds is with Pathfinder.
Oh yeah.
Right. There is nobody else who can do it at this point.
Right. And I mean, yes, people can do it, but it's just not the same. And
Well, it's like Todd McFarlane. He has to hire people who draw like Todd McFarlane because he can't do it anymore. He can't keep up with all of his
which is
titles.
funny
He's a
because
businessman.
Renaissance artists did that shit all the time.
Everything old is new again.
There you
The
go.
king is dead. Long live the king.
That's right.
This is the nature of the beast. It's the cycle that we're in.
So, I mean, throwing on our speculative hats again, it's, things like the critical hit deck, things that the accessories and things like that. I'm wondering how effective those are going to be because, those are really good. I really like the critical hit and critical fumble deck. It added a nice little wrinkle to the game.
Got a lot of mileage out of it.
Hell, we got mileage out of it and we weren't even playing Pathfinder.
Right.
Well, that to me is what, if I were to wish list, and I don't like wish listing. I don't like doing this, but what I wish is we had more system agnostic things like the critical hit deck, right? That doesn't necessarily live in the world of 3.5 D&D or 4th edition or 5th edition D&D, or Green Ronin doesn't make Freeport a Pathfinder game, right? Freeport is just Freeport, and it's agnostic, right? I would love to have more of these things. This is one of those wishes that I'm sure I will never get.
Yeah. Well, that's that. I mean, that in itself. I mean, if you want to appeal to a larger base, that's what you do, right? You make it agnostic, and then you can insert like
that's
the rule stuff at the
it
end.
makes sense to me, right? Yeah, it makes sense to me as a lover of fluff, right? Because I am Warhammer has taught me that. I love the fluff of Warhammer, both 40K and fantasy, and all I want are source books of fluff, because I know whoever's making Warhammer right now, they're not going to be making Warhammer in 3 years, right? Because that's the nature of the Warhammer license and role-playing games.
Yeah. Hell, even
so
their
just give me the
fiction.
fluff.
You know, I mean, Abnett is about the only one that still doesn't. He doesn't do it nearly as much as he used to.
Yeah, it's they've slowed down a lot. Well, the poor guy, he's got to.
I mean,
sleep
yeah, some
sometimes.
motherfucker's like chained to a desk.
Yeah, in the Black Library, getting his work done.
Right, get to work, servitor.
Yeah, exactly. So, Mike, what do you see? Because you have had to do this in the past. You have had to placate players when a new edition comes out, and we want to do things like update our character for the new edition, right? Or let's say we are playing our Sea Princess campaign, and Pathfinder 2.0 comes out. It's really good. What do we do at that point? Like, as a GM, because that's kind of what this show is theoretically about. As a GM, how do I pull that off and not piss everybody off? Or does this have to be player driven? Like, does this decision have to come from the players, I guess?
I can't say for certain. I know in my case, I put my foot down and I said no 4th edition. I had already converted from 2nd to 3rd.
Right.
And I kept that going as long as I could. And then when we went to 5th, I completely started the campaign over. There was no conversion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I as I recall, we went from 1st to 2nd edition seamlessly when it comes to the campaign itself. And then when we started 3rd edition, as I recall, we redid the campaign again. Am I misremembering that, Mike? Because to me,
yeah,
in our gaming life, right, our gaming editions, 1st and 2nd edition was always like the Valcon edition, whereas 3.5 was always the Drake edition to us, because it all revolved around the characters we were playing at the time. And then, so switching editions, so if you're playing, Pathfinder 1 and you're going to switch to Pathfinder 2, we're also assuming they're not doing something with the game world itself, like upping the timeline or doing something else. It might be a good time for people to go, you know what? We've been doing this for a long time. I need to play myself, not with myself, but play myself for a while, and step away from the game, or maybe bring in some new people. Hey, you know what? We're starting a new campaign, and we've got a slot that, so-and-so got married and, somebody else moved off or whatever. And we got a slot that, hey, you're a new gamer. It's a new edition. We're all learning it together. That's a perfect time to start a new group or a new campaign.
Well, I can say right now, without having even seen it, I will not be switching my campaign over to Pathfinder 2.0.
What if we demand it, Mike?
And then we'll play something different.
Oh, no.
And I will not be the one running it.
Sure.
I won't buy it.
Okay, so why? Why won't you?
Because time investment, money investment. I think 5th edition puts out very little stuff compared to the way they used to.
Lesson learned, I think. Yeah.
I'm fine with buying 1 or maybe 2 books a year. Pathfinder will really stretch that. And I'm not going to try to compete 2 different book lines at the same time, competing with time.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
That makes total sense to me. And and that's I guess that's the burden of the adult gamer, is you've only got so much time to devote to your game.
Yeah.
And, as I've gotten older, it's like, I need to decide right now, I've got all these games on my shelf, and I probably won't play all of them or play most of them, but, I need to pick out 1 or 2 games or just 1 game that I want to focus on, and that be my primary game. And then if somebody else wants to run something else, maybe if I've got the book, then we'll do that. But yeah, am I going to get the Pathfinder core rulebook? Probably.
Yes, right. We'll get the core rulebook just in case one of my friends wants to run it. Correct.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the consensus at this point.
One of the things that I find this is the hard part for me with Pathfinder, because I only own the core rule book, and I didn't really. It was at the wrong time for me. The Pathfinder core book is the player's handbook, the DMG, and the monsters manual all in one, right? Essentially.
Yes. Yeah, essentially.
Okay.
I mean, they had the bestiary, but yeah, I
right.
mean,
Well, they have like 13 of them because
yeah,
this is
of course.
Paizo. To me, that is like why I dislike that, for the same reason I dislike cable, because I don't want to pay for things that I am not going to use. I know D&D gets like razzed about the 3 core books totaling up to quote unquote retail price over $120, right, or something like that. Though no, that never actually works. But the thought is that if you're a player, all you need is your player's handbook, and you're not getting anything you don't need.
Right.
Like I don't want, for me and my group or our group and other groups that I've seen in shops, like a whole group of 6 players, 4 to 6 players, aren't necessarily all going to plop down $60 for a book, especially if they only need 1/3 of it, right?
Right.
And we know for a fact, like any game with any kind of leveling or rules, like any what I would say maybe non-storyteller game, you need the core rulebook. People who have the core rulebook are more invested in the game. Like every game that's successful that we've ever played in is the games that everybody at the table has the book for.
Yeah.
Right.
And the reason for that is the ability to reference and read that book away from the game.
Yeah. You can level up your character. Like we've tried many times to run a different game, and it's impossible because I can't, as the GM, explain everything that I need to explain and have everyone pass around a book to make characters. It simply does not work. It just doesn't work. So I hope, again, lesson learned, that I don't need everything in the core rulebook, right?
Nope.
And I think most people who play D&D would say that nobody needs the DMG.
Yep. The only people that complain about a 3-book system are game masters. Those are the only people that complain.
Yeah. And to that end, even if I paid retail for those books, let's say $120, it's pennies compared to how much I've actually gotten out of it, like actually used it, because you get the reading of the thing and then you get the use of the thing over and over again for so many hours. Not to mention the fact that nobody buys retail anymore. It just doesn't happen. And unless you buy at your friendly local game store, if you happen to have one. And everybody knows now that you don't buy the DMG. You just don't. I mean, you might later because you have the extra cash after you've run 3 games, but you don't need it.
Right.
No.
So I don't necessarily want to buy a book that I don't need 2/3 of, at least as a player.
Right.
And I mean, we need our players for the game. That's the only way we can do this.
Yep.
So again, I don't know where that fits into the 2.0 Pathfinder system, but I hope not.
Yep. All right. Well, we've reached that time. So, as always, we thank you for watching.
Yes.
Everybody's
Thank you very
viewers.
much, everyone in chat, for joining us.
Yeah.
We didn't really have a whole lot to work with here, and I'm pretty sure we'll revisit this after we all have our grubby mitts on the playtest material.
That's right.
Boshi, get Pathfinder 2.0 and run it for us.
There you go.
There you go. Hey, that's all there is to it. That's it.
Actually, Mike, I challenge Mike.
Oh, what? Wait a minute. Is it
I
New Year's
read
already?
It was a tiny little snippet, and I don't believe it was part of the press release. I think it was something that has come after that. Is that they're doing charity games at GaryCon? It just so happens Mike is going to GaryCon, so you need to be our field reporter and spy.
There you go.
And take spy shots like a paparazzi.
Let's see what I can do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mike's got
well
the
job. Well job. So again, thank you everyone, and we will see you next time.